and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of the Democratic View, and I am the hostess. My name is Phyllis Italiano, and I have with me today the man who, but for 15 votes, would have been our supervisor, much to the chagrin of many people. His name is Zachary Cohen. How are you?
I'm wonderful, and thank you for having me. I stayed away too long. I'm
Yes.
very happy to be back.
Oh, that's good, because I love people like you. You can talk a lot, and I just have to point you in the right direction.
Yes.
So one of the things I wanted to talk about today was, I know that you're on the Nature Preserve Committee. I would like you to talk about what you do on that committee and some of the things that you have been doing in the last couple of years.
I greatly appreciate that you asked, because I think that the Nature Preserve Committee historically has been maybe the most important, or one of the most important, maybe along with the CPF committee, of committees in the town that doesn't get televised, so we don't get the same kind of recognition. But we are the premier, in a sense, the only committee that discusses the management and the uses of the preserve areas that the town buys. And in East Hampton, that's a major project, because we have way into the hundreds, many hundreds of preserved areas. And I think we're up to about 4,600 or 4,700 acres of preserved land.
So you mean that half acre next to me, that's preserved, is under your jurisdiction?
I know it's not our jurisdiction. We are an advisory committee. So all we can do is advise the town board what they should do, and then they have to decide. Now, actually, for certain minor things that don't require town board votes, we will just advise natural resources, or we'll advise the land management, and they'll accept it or not, whatever. But yes, that's the case. Unfortunately, maybe Nature Preserve is not quite the correct moniker at the moment. People have a vision that it, just like you're saying, they don't imagine a half-acre property. Probably, if they had thought ahead, the name of the committee would have been just the Preserve Committee, because clearly we span from preserves that are hundreds and hundreds of acres with lots and lots of wildlife, down to 0.1 acre of wetlands or things like that. So, but yes, most of them, all we do is say this doesn't need special management. We have a generic management plan that says you can't cut anything, or whatever, certain reasonable things, you can't build fires. But then we look at special properties and say this has special needs, and we will write management plans. Louse Point was one of the ones I was very proud of. It took at least a year and a half. The main committee was myself and Norm Edwards. I think Eileen Roman was also on it. But we had to coordinate with the trustees who controlled the beaches, the baymen and their uses, the swimmers who come out to Louse Point. Believe it or not, it's legal to duck hunt in some areas there, but nobody does it anymore. And it was a good year and a half of scurrying around, talking to Tom Talmadge, the town engineer. What kind of material do you use for the parking lots? And I was really proud, one, because we also got the trustees together with the town board to agree on something, and about a 20-page management plan that charts out the future of Louse Point, how to preserve it and use it at the same time. So, and our group has the expertise. I mean, if you want to talk about, is someplace safe for hunting, we're the group to go to discuss it with. If you want to talk about hiking trails, we're the group to go to. And we are currently starting to go through a couple of hundred of parcels that just backlogged and haven't gone through. The town owns immense number of parcels that have kind of been forgotten.
Good. Now, when you say the group, how many are on this group?
By law, we're supposed to have at least 10. And one of the other things that shows how important they felt in the beginning our group should be, and our group exists by law. It's in town code, what the Nature Reserve Committee is supposed to do, and how it's supposed to function. And we are actually given by law, say, more rights than what are defined for a citizens, a CAC. So, for example, the head of the planning department is ex officio liaison to our group. The director of natural resources is an ex officio to our group and will sometimes come, sometimes a representative. Land management, the trustees send a representative. Sometimes we get a representative from Suffolk County Park. Sometimes we get a representative, right now we have from Iconic Land Trust sending. So we actually have a very, very broad reach also in who we work with and who bring us issues. And also what I think we're often the eyes out in the community, and we'll bring the issues then to the proper employees or the town board.
Now, do you meet regularly and where?
We either meet in the big meeting room, the second Thursday of every month at 5:30. And of course, by the way, all meetings of all variety are always open to the public. Doesn't mean you always get to speak, but usually I'll find a way to let you speak. I'm the chair, and I've been chair since about 2008. Sometimes we meet, though, there's a little conference room where the town board offices are. And actually, sometimes I do that because we're having a huge meeting, very interesting one, next week. And it's going to be so long, I said to everybody, I'll bring food. And I don't feel like I can bring food into the main. But a good example, I mean, one of the other things was excited for the committee. And the committee's got, I mean, we have a person on the committee who I can't remember if his child is the 14th or 15th generation of the family that's lived there. And I came, I didn't come from here. I'm never going to claim I'm local. But the first thing I did once I decided to get interested in being part of the community was put myself under the tutelage of people who were local. And when I joined the committee, Bob Miller Sr.
I'm not local either. I just wish I was.
Well, I don't want to make any pretenses, but I have a great respect. I've always said community preservation, while it's practiced by buying land and buildings, really you should look at the title, and it's community that you're trying to preserve. It's people make up the community. You can have all the buildings in the world preserved and all the land in the world preserved. If you don't preserve the people and a way of life, there's no community, and it's almost all for naught. So I like learning, and I joined. It was very quiet for several years and learned about a lot of the traditions, because a lot of what we do is that way. Other thing I'd say about the committee is that we really could show people how to operate. Only once in the 10 years have I ever thought there's been even the hint of anything political, and I'm not even talking about Republican, Democrat, I'm talking about hikers versus the hunters. That's been dispelled. It happened maybe once. And we all get along. We all say, we're all cooperative. We're all trying to look at saying, when we look at a hunting issue, the sense is whether you're a hiker or a hunter, or I got on originally as a mountain biker, we're looking and saying, is this safe? When would it be safe? Is there times it wouldn't be safe? And we just look at it as a group without any kind of political agenda. Same with the trails. And it's marvelous to see this cooperation. So I'll jump ahead in some of the things that I'm very proud of, but I'm truly proud of for the group. Pussy's Pond Bridge was a real great triumph. So I'll go back to Bob Miller Sr., one of the great locals, president of the local Waterfowl USA East Hampton chapter, educated me about the springs, about the traditions in the spring, raising pheasant and quail to release. And I was totally reverential and, learned, who unfortunately died while I was on the committee. But he was involved in building the bridge in the early 90s in the Waterfowl USA. And so it was very close to the Nature Preserve Committee, that we felt very close to it. And when it finally was torn down, within a month, there were people on the committee saying, we've got to rebuild this, we have to find a way to rebuild it. We had a lot of difficulties. We just bluntly did not get support from the administration. Money we could put aside, and then we would decide we couldn't spend it, and we just said, fine. So our committee, again, we work with the trustees, we work with Trail Preservation Society. I went over to the trustees on administrative issues. Ray Harjan, who was a great Democratic candidate and came very close to being a trustee, went to Trail Preservation Society. We formed an alliance. We said, let's raise the money. The Nature Reserve Committee backed it fully, would help find people to volunteer, smooth the way. It took a long time.
I went to a board meeting at the spring school when that teacher, whose name escapes me right now.
Was it Tracy Fraser?
Yes,
Yeah.
she was a fifth grade teacher.
Yeah.
Her students came and presented their models,
Yes.
which then wound up at town hall when it was at the old particular place, location. And I mean, it was, of course, being a teacher, I loved that.
Yeah, I know.
That's what I call, really hands-on, getting your kids involved. And Ray was there, and there was, I believe, an architect from Sag Harbor at that time who was also involved in this project. So to see, that must have been 3 years before this really happened, finally happened.
Well, we had to raise money. We got a little bit of help from the town, but very, very little. Tom Talmadge especially was a big help on engineering, the town engineer. But we raised all the money, and Ray especially. I had to deal with a lot of administrative back and forth, and again, used my trust with the trustees who I could go to, and they gave us a difficult design problem because they said, we don't want anything that if it falls in the water, if it burns, could harm the environment. So that meant a much more expensive kind of bridge and a change in the woods we used, but it did it. And moving on a little bit, I don't want to take up the whole time on Nature Preserve, but we are pushing a little bit because, as I said, we're starting to look at properties. And we looked at properties, and lo and behold, we realized that along the Napeague stretch, the town has bought some phenomenal properties to be used as either nature reserve or beachfront properties, and what was less known that was discovered by either myself or Rick Whalen, who's Mr. Encyclopedia of town-owned land. He was the town attorney. We really knew more about the possibilities of where you might put a beach, where you might have a nature reserve that's attached to a beach. And we've always been pro-use as long as it doesn't harm something. So we're going to be discussing a proposal for 3 very large oceanfront parcels and want them looked at as a group. It's going to take, I don't doubt at all, it could take way more than another year to put all the groups together. I've already contacted the trustees. I'll be at their meeting on Tuesday night, get feedback from them. The CFAR, the Citizens for Access Rights, I'm sure, going to weigh in, and I told them I want to meet with them. Jeremy Samuelson and I have already spoken about, Concerned Citizen Montauk. And that's the kind of work that I like, that is building consensus and getting something done.
You sent me this, and I took a look at it, and the only thing I really worry about, having had oceanfront property in Fire Island, I wasn't oceanfront. My sister's house was oceanfront. We were the ones behind it. But I can't tell you how people used to go over the dunes all the time. And we would have snow fencing. There was snow fencing and stairs, and they would still go over the dunes. And we would say, no, you can't, don't go on the dunes. How do you keep people off the dunes if you're going to be eventually opening this kind of...
Well, first of all, these properties, some of them are already open, except you just have to park on the highway. So they're already open. There's nothing, and in fact, one of the worries right now, there's nothing that tells anybody, there's one very beautiful environmentally sensitive parcel, and there's nothing to tell anybody how to walk across it without harming it to get to the water. There actually happens to be way on one side, which is perfect, not through the middle, a sand path that goes up and over the dune. And an example of this parcel, and this is where our knowledge comes in. Most everyone knows about the big parcel, 37 acres on the ocean. What not everyone knows is that in about 10 years ago, we made a trade. I don't think any money was involved. We made some trade with Lunch, the lobster roll,
Yes.
who had some parcels that weren't matching up, and we swapped. And now there's a parcel that we own that's disturbed, it's not environmentally sensitive, there used to be a structure on it, and it could be where you could pull people off the road so you don't have to park on the road and they can park. This is 600 to 700 feet from the beach. So you're probably not going to get the kind of revelers that you might be getting in another beach. What you're probably going to get is what I call the nature preserve beach people who are willing to enjoy the nature, the little walk on the sand path up and over, which they can do now. It'll just be a little bit more organized. There's already beach driving is legal in all these areas, and there's access. So I'm not too concerned about the extra use. I'm hoping that what the extra use comes from is maybe siphoning off overused areas that are overused so that it equalizes out.
I mean, some of the beaches that have enormous amount of people on them some of those people would be willing to go to a more rustic, unconventional kind of beach.
Yes. Now, one of the proposals is for a regular bathing beach, which we know because of the trustee lawsuit is probably years away. But I also know that if we wait until then and then begin planning, it could be several more years away. So my view is let's start planning. Let's start getting criticism now. Let's start getting the kudos, like this is great now. And one of the reasons, again, this is me, I said, let's do 3 of them together because then I can pull different groups of neighbors, different groups of users. The CFAR commits and said, okay, what if we do this here? Would you relinquish something over here? What about this? And when I have a lot of people together and you can gain their respect, then often I can build a consensus so you don't ram it down anyone's throat, and you hope for 70 or 80% of the people to come away happy. I may be an optimist, but that's how I like to operate.
Well, consensus is a word we haven't heard very much in East Hampton lately.
It's partially why I wanted to talk about the nature reserve, Pussy's Pond Bridge, because our group, we have a few people that you might know if they're Democrats or Republican, but I can tell you when we walk into wherever we're holding a meeting, nobody knows from your political, nobody cares. And all we care about is what's best for the town, and that's, I think, why we've been successful and get a lot done, and why we get respect.
As it should be.
I hope so.
Yes,
I hope that's what the future will bring.
I know that the trustees also operate that way too, as what's best for East Hampton.
I think it's why I always get along, and I found it so easy to gain the trust of the trustees because all I did was anytime I came across something that I said, ooh, this would concern the trustees, I'd send it over to Diane McNally or Stephanie or Nat Miller as now our liaison with the trustees and say, take a look at this. I don't want to move forward until you give me your opinion on it. And that has not been the way the town board has operated with the trustees for a long time. I can't understand why. It's so much better. It's so much better to operate where, and so they contact me. They'll contact me when they'll say, hey, we realized this is the nature preserve next to something that we're going to be working with. You know, do you have a comment on it? That's how it should be.
And
it's
you
so
know,
logical.
it's such this kind of attitude and this kind of idea about how we should be operating is so important now because we have some really big problems.
Yes.
I mean, you take the scavenger waste.
Yes.
You know, something that I know a lot of people don't realize, but portable water, which is the water you drink and use in your household, is precious in this world. It's the new oil, and what's going to eventually happen to the scavenger waste situation is very important.
Yes, and we've seen there's clearly been a lot of fighting over that, but last night there was a vote, and there was an acceptance of a proposal for a comprehensive study. The comprehensive study covers 3 areas, one of which is water quality, especially I think it was harbor and groundwater quality. It's more than just a study of the scavenger waste plant. One of the things that's intelligent, in my opinion, that was not well understood is it includes a study of, I don't know if they're going to try to finish inventorying every single septic system in town before they start working on scavenger waste. I hope not, but I'm sure they're going to go 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 data points, because if you're going to design your scavenger waste plant or design what to do, you've got to have some kind of sense of how many old-fashioned systems do we have out there that are causing pollution or excessive amounts of septic waste. How many do we have that are probably failing? You can't just go and make some of these decisions about what to do. So I'm encouraged. It's frustrating to me how long it's taken, but in the end, it's so important. I'm willing to put up with it for the fact that we're going to make a more informed decision. I also think it's going to probably pop up right around the time of the election. So it's going to become an election issue, I bet. Because this study's going to take, we're in April now, and this study to finish is going to take about 6 months.
Well, also, I mean, we read recently that Southampton is actually doing a similar kind of thing with septic systems.
Well, what they're doing is, and I think this is where my University of Chicago training comes in. My training of,
and Lord knows you have more training than anybody I know.
This is where I my MBA in economics and analytic finance comes in, where I would need to study Southampton's system, but I would not go simplistically into selling a $10 million bond to try to encourage people to give them $5,000 each to replace their septic systems. Undoubtedly, though, we need to develop, I think you'll end up overpaying. Undoubtedly, we need some kind of incentives, not just punishments, to get people to upgrade. I would hope you could end up with something that's more of a loan than for that kind of money. Now, it was a very successful program for the oil tanks that we had.
I did it right away, as soon as I heard of it.
But that's also, the oil tanks was, I think, $375. That's a very big difference between $5,000. So anyways, I love the idea of that they're thinking about. But Peter Van Scoyoc and Sylvia both raised a very good point, that at the moment, sadly, the Suffolk County Health has not permitted some of the newer and more advanced systems. And we may actually want to wait on this, so that right now you'd be upgrading from a pre-1974 system to what is essentially the same as the system you put in
You know what? I
1974.
couldn't agree with them more.
And we're so close, and part of the comprehensive study will be how close are we, and how expensive will it be to put in really good septic systems?
Well, I understand that. I mean, having been to all of those meetings that we have had over the years about septic systems, and I'm interested in doing one that's going to change some of it.
Yes.
I don't just want the same old thing. Otherwise, there's no sense doing it. I want something that's going to be upgraded where it might affect the nitrogenous waste. So I won't feel guilty every time.
And some of them, if you've got a really old system, you actually would save money. If you penciled it out, you need to service the modern systems much less. Now, some of the very, very modern systems with the ultra-low nitrogen output do cost something to run, but this is all the kind of thing, and then education is going to be part of the comprehensive plan.
Education is part of everything as far as I'm concerned. And thank you very much for coming. My God, it always goes so fast.
So
when you're
fast.
here.
Well, I didn't have trouble talking.
No, you're going to come back. You're going to come back, and we're going to talk about some more of these issues, because I'm also want to talk about solar panels too, which is something I'm interested in.
Well, you know, something that's very sad is that, believe it or not, Berkeley, California, my other big graduate school, came up with a fabulous idea, and Fred Thiel wanted to push it here, and we ran into problems, which was the town would borrow money so they could borrow it at a low rate. The town would then loan the homeowner money to do solar panels, and you would only have to pay back the town's rate. So if the town could borrow money at 3%, that's what you would pay it back at. However, it became a lien on your taxes, and you would pay it back as part of your taxes every year. It seemed like an idea, and that way the town was protected. If you didn't pay it back, if you didn't pay back the loan, you're going to get your house foreclosed on. The problem came is that the federal government said that we won't allow that on any FHA-sponsored loans. And the federal government is the one who got in the way and screwed up the program where Fred Thiel was pushing it. It was first done in Berkeley. So